Hi there, this is part 2 of our YouTube video on appeals. Check out our part 1, the link is in the description below. In this part 2 of our YouTube video series on appeal, we will be talking about the new terminologies that you need to know when talking about the appeals process. Also, we'll talk about the general appeals process from start to finish to keep in mind how the appeals process will work over the next few months or years depending how long it'll take. And lastly, we'll talk about the breaking news that happened while we were recording and editing this YouTube video. So let's dive in! Hi, my name is Katherine. I'm a lawyer and I also think differently. In talking about the appeal, we should also talk about the different terminologies when you're now dealing with appellate court. It's not the same terminology as when you were dealing with the trial court or with the circuit court, the lower court we were talking about before. So here are new terminologies to know. On appeal, the parties are no longer called plaintiff or defendant and vice versa. Instead, they have a new designation on appeal. The person who is filing the appeal will be called the appellant, and the other party is called the appellee. When Amber Heard filed her notice of appeal, she became the appellant and Johnny Depp became the appellee. Then, when Johnny Depp filed his own appeal, Johnny Depp also became an appellant and Amber Heard became an appellee. Both of them will be designated as appellant/appellee and Johnny Depp appellant/appellee. Another difference is that in the lower court or the circuit court or the trial court, so there's a lot of sometimes names for these lower courts, but in Judge Ascarati's court, just to make it simple, there was Judge Ascarati, one judge, and the jury. But in the Court of Appeals, there will actually be 3 judges. There will not be any jury. Instead, there will be 3 appellate court judges. And we saw right now there are 22 appellate court judges, and out of that 22, 3 will be selected to hear the appeal of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. We don't know who those will be. They get assigned those cases, so we'll know later on down the line. You might be wondering, will the 3 appellate judges actually consult with Judge Ascarati regarding their potential ruling on appeal? The answer is no. The appellate court does not talk to the lower court regarding their decision. Instead, there are certain standards that the Court of Appeal judges follow in reviewing whatever Judge Ascarati ruled on and also in reviewing what the judgment or the verdict of the jury is. Another important difference with the Court of Appeal is what decisions of the 3 judges will be. For example, since the Court of Appeal is not a new trial, no trial and no jury will be overseeing what happens in the Court of Appeal, the 3 Court of Appeals judges will issue a written opinion that will have what the ruling is, what the evidence are that is the basis of their ruling, and anything else that support their opinion. The Court of Appeals judges will issue an opinion that will either affirm the judgment, which means that whatever the jury said will stand, and that's the end of the appeal, or they will reverse the judgment, meaning they will reverse the jury verdict and say the jury verdict is no longer applicable, and they will remand the case back to the lower court, meaning to the circuit court, and most likely specifically Judge Ascarati's court for a new trial. And that's where the new trial will happen in the lower court. Since the appeal is not a new trial, the parties for the appeal, the appellant and the appellee, must write the written argument in what is called the briefs. So there will be the appellant brief and the appellee reply brief and vice versa. Amber Heard will have to file her appellant brief, and then Johnny Depp will have to file an appellee reply brief as to the arguments that Amber Heard will indicate in her appellant brief. Similarly, since Johnny Depp filed his own appeal, Johnny Depp will file his appellant brief, and then Amber Heard will have a certain amount of time to file her reply appellee brief in response to Johnny Depp's appellate brief. As I mentioned in my other videos, the first step in filing an appeal is actually filing a document document called the Notice of Appeal. Here, Amber Heard filed the first Notice of Appeal on July 21, 2022. Let's take a look at her Notice of Appeal. The Notice of Appeal, as you will see, is a one-page document that doesn't really provide elaborate detail of what they will be appealing from. In Amber Heard's Notice of Appeal, it starts off with hereby gives notice of her appeal to the Virginia Court of Appeals from this court's June 24, 2022 final judgment order. This is the part where she tells the Court of Appeals what are the orders that she will be appealing from. And the first one she lists is the court, meaning Judge Ascarati's court, the order dated June 24, 2022, which is the date that Judge Ascarati finalized the order, meaning file stamp the jury verdict and say that the jury verdict is the final judgment. And the next one is she is claiming to appeal the July 13 order on her post-trial motions. That's the post-trial motion where Amber Heard was asking the judge to reconsider the jury verdict, the new evidence, and also the issue about juror number 15, that he was the wrong juror and should not have been a juror at that trial, which also Judge Ascarati denied that post-trial motion. And the last thing that she lists is that she's appealing from all additional orders and rulings by the trial court prior to the entry of the final judgment order and post-trial motions order. That last sentence is basically Amber Heard's catch-all phrase to say that any other order that was issued before the final judgment on June 24, 2022, she will likely appeal those as well. We previously talked about Amber Heard's Notice of Appeal. Now let's talk about Johnny Depp's Notice of Appeal. As you will see, his Notice of Appeal has a file stamp that says he filed it on July 22, 2022. Again, that date is critical for his appeal because it triggers the statutory procedures and deadlines for his appeal. Also, his Notice of Appeal says that he is appealing from all adverse ruling. That means he's appealing for all of the rulings that went against him. So he doesn't need to specify which one because he doesn't know yet. So that's his catch-all phrase as well as to adverse ruling. And he's also appealing from the final judgment order of this circuit court entered on June 24, 2022. And that order is relating to the verdict against Johnny Depp as to the second statement that Adam Waldman made. Now that you've seen the Notice of Appeal for Amber Heard and the Notice of Appeal for Johnny Depp, you can see that it's really a very simple one-page legal document that they filed with the Court of Appeal that doesn't need to specify exactly what their legal arguments are. Their legal arguments will be more in detail when they file their appellate briefs. And the appellate briefs have very specific limit as to the number of pages. The appellate brief limit is actually 50 pages. So as you can see, those appellate briefs will be thick because it will have the arguments they want to present and the laws supporting it and the evidence that they want to present. So what happens next? Within 90 days from when they filed their Notice of Appeal, the circuit court clerk or Judge Ascarati's clerk has all that time to prepare what is called the Record on Appeal. The Record on Appeal includes exhibits, deposition transcripts, court hearing transcripts, ruling, orders, basically evidence and statement of facts that both Amber Heard and Johnny Depp want to rely on for their appeals arguments. The Record on Appeal is very important because the only thing that the three Court of Appeal judges can look at when they're reviewing the appeal from Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are the Record on Appeal. I remember when I externed for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal in the federal level, when we're reviewing the arguments and the evidence that the appellant and the appellees are citing in their briefs, if we can't find it in the Record on Appeal that was submitted to us, then we will assume that it does not exist in our world of Court of Appeals. That's how important that is. If there's a specific order or an evidence that anyone forgets to attach on their Record on Appeal and then they cite it on their briefs, it will not be considered and it will be said that we cannot find it under Record on Appeal. That's why right now I bet both Amber Heard's legal team and Johnny Depp's legal team are diligently looking at all of the records and whatever record on appeal that they want to create. And what happens happens next is, once Judge Ascarati's clerk files the record on appeal to the Court of Appeals, then a notice will be sent to all parties notifying them that that has happened. Then, from that date of when the record on appeal has been filed, the parties will have 40 days to file their appellant brief. And that's when the parties start writing and drafting their legal arguments and supporting evidence so that they can submit it to the Court of Appeal. And then the other party will have a certain amount of time to file their reply brief, and then at some point the Court of Appeal will schedule the oral arguments. The oral arguments for Court of Appeal is very fascinating for me because the 3 panel judges will sit there above, higher than the lawyers, so they're towering over them and looking down at them, and then the lawyers, each side, will have a specific amount of time to present their argument. And looking at the Virginia Court of Appeals rule, it says that they have about 15 minutes each to present their argument. 15 minutes is not a long time, and as we saw in Judge Ascarati's court, she also had time limit, and managing time limit was an issue for Amber Heard's legal team, where they're used up a lot of the time. They will have to figure out how to manage their time well. And when you're presenting to the Court of Appeal or having your oral arguments in front of the judges will actually listen to what you're going to say, but at the same time, they will be interrupting you in the middle of what you've prepared to tell them because they have specific questions that they are trying to figure out in relation to your appeal. You might have a list of things you want to talk about, but if the Court of Appeal judges has a question, you have to pause and answer their question and then move on to yours. It's a lot of disruption while you're presenting your argument as well. Within that span of 15 minutes, you have to be very precise, very specific with your responses, and you shouldn't ramble on for sure. That's why most people, when they file their appeal, they also hire a separate lawyer from their lawyers in the trial. That's because there are specific lawyers that specialize in appeals procedure. They're called appellate lawyers. Here, based on the court filings, it looked like both Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are using the same lawyers in the lower court in Judge Ascarati's court's trial for their appeal. Now, they can always add additional appellate attorneys if they want to, or if their law firm actually handles appellate issues, then they can just go ahead and have an attorney in their firm who specializes there. Breaking news! While we were recording and editing this YouTube video, Amber Heard issued a press release stating that she hired a new appellate lawyer. Interestingly, in that press release, they also indicated that Elaine Bredehoff is stepping down as Amber Heard's lawyer and instead hiring David L. Axelrod and J. Ward Brown as the new appellate attorneys for Amber Heard. It is not uncommon for appellants to hire a new lawyer, specifically appellate lawyers, for their appeals. That's because the appeals process is a whole different ballgame and different from trying a case. There are different rules, there are different ways of speaking to the judges, and there are different laws involved in the Court of Appeals. I think it's a good move for Amber Heard to hire a new counsel who will specifically focus on appellate issues. When would oral arguments be scheduled? We don't know because the Court of Appeals, once they get the briefs, they'll set a schedule and the oral arguments might be scheduled a year from now or 2 years from now. Who knows? But as you can see, there are a lot of procedures that will happen next now that the notice of appeal have been filed for both parties. We'll just have to wait and see. It won't be as exciting as the trial and it will be a long wait, but we will see the process unfold as the months go by. Based on the timeline, it might be around November, December of this year when we will see the appellant briefs by Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And in those briefs, as I mentioned earlier, we will see their actual legal arguments and evidence that they're supporting for their appeal. But both of them or either of them can also request an extension of time, meaning they want more time to write their arguments because that brief is their really one shot at their your appeal. By the time you go into the oral arguments, the three judges already have an idea of how they will rule, and it's very seldom that you can change their opinion during the oral argument. Usually the oral argument is when they're trying to clarify certain issues that might still be questionable in their head, but to really turn them around might be difficult if you're going to rely on the 15-minute oral argument that you have in front of them. That's why those written briefs are very, very important for both Amber Heard and Johnny Depp to be as perfect as possible. So there you have it. That's how the appeals process works in general. There are obviously a lot of other nuances and other specific rules, but these are what we can think about for now as a broader perspective. And as each of the procedures happen, I will create more video to explain what they are. Again, I love explaining all of these legal information and making them simpler to understand because they are fun to understand, and you might just be able to apply them to yourself if you find yourself in this situation, which I hope not. If you learned something new from this video, please go ahead and click subscribe. And also, if you have any other questions that you'd like us to answer, please go ahead and comment that below, and we will try our best to make a YouTube video to answer your burning questions. Bye!